Welcome back, dear viewers. As we said earlier, that we are going to talk about Egyptian-Russian relations, as there are plans to build a Russian industrial zone in East Port Said. We'll try to know to what extent this zone will impact positively the overall trade. And to shed more light on this issue, I'm delighted to be joined here in the studio with Dr. Yossef Mazher, former First Under-Secretary, Ministry of Trade. Good morning, Dr. Mazher.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us, Doctor. But before we start off with the interview with you, we'd like to go through this report now, of course, under the auspices of both the Egyptian and the Russian Ministers of Trade, the Federation of the Egyptian Chambers of Commerce, in cooperation with the Russian Federation of Russian Chambers. They have held a meeting, and Dina Hwaidak was there. Let's see what she has for us in this report.
The Egyptian-Russian Joint Committee for Trade, Economic, Scientific and Technical Cooperation started its 10th meeting under the auspices of Trade and Industry Minister Tarek Qabil and his Russian counterpart Denis Mantrov. The second Egyptian-Russian Forum main aim was to discuss the future of the strategic relations between the two countries.
We had already a very good relationship with Russia since a long time. Maybe they stopped for a while, but after the meeting between the two presidents during a very short period, it's become very important to increase our relation, our investment and commercial relation with Russia.
It's very important because, as I mentioned in my speech, there are a lot of things which have to be adjusted. And without the help of the government, the private sector cannot do it alone. So it's very important that it's like a public-private partnership in developing all the necessary, from time to time small, from time to time big elements which create a condition of comfort so that the private sector can enter and then massively develop business. As I mentioned, the potential of business is enormous, but there are still a lot of obstacles. So I very much believe that this joint work, because the specificity of this intergovernment commission is that it is made it is intergovernmental, but the private sector is an active part of establishing the protocol.
The forum was attended by Minister of Trade and Industry Tarek Qabil with the participation of 60 major Russian companies working on the infrastructure projects in the energy, equipment and transportation sectors in Egypt, along with the ministry officials and heads of the Russian authorities concerned with promoting trade and investment in Egypt.
This is the beginning of a visit. The visit will include a big delegation from the industry and the trade of Russia, and we will have a negotiation tomorrow to talk specifics on the industrial area of Russia.
This event comes at a very important time as the two sides are seeking to strengthen the strategic ties binding the two countries in the political and economic services.
The second Egyptian-Russian Business Forum, organized by the Federation of the Egyptian Chamber of Commerce and the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of the Russian Federation, will complete the work of the first forum that increased the trade between the two countries and strengthened the relationships. Dina Hwaidak, Nile TV International.
Welcome back, dear viewers. Back to you, Dr. Mazher. We were talking about the Egyptian-Russian relations, and as we saw in this report, that there were 3 cooperation agreements signed after the meeting of the Egyptian-Russian Joint Committee. So can you tell us more about these agreements?
Yes, well, first of all, maybe a few facts or background facts.
Yes.
Russian-Egyptian cooperation is not new, as we all know.
Yes.
In fact, the man in the street is quite aware of the highlights of this cooperation. The main highlight, of course, was the High Dam, or the
yes.
Dam in Aswan. And this, of course, was let's say, a very important step in the relations, because it sort of solved the problem. Egypt was trying to get its finance from the World Bank, etc., and there were problems. and then that time Soviet Union stepped in and took over. And this is a project which is really very substantial. But what maybe the ministry doesn't quite know in detail is that Russia, as it is now, had a very big hand in the industrialization of Egypt. In fact, many of the landmarks of this industry, like for example the iron and steel industry, the coke industry, which is a feeding industry with iron and steel, and many others, the aluminium also. So all these were started during 5-year plans, and there was a very strong relationship, and the impact is still there. So it is, even though one of the speakers on this, on your news reel said that the cooperation has sort of cooled down for some time. Yes. It has always been there, but let's say the landmarks, first because of political reasons or other reasons, it had cooled down a little bit and now is back again. So you mentioned there are 3 agreements. We won't go into the agreements in, let's say, with details, because there are responsible people who know exactly what the agreements have. But in general, it makes sense that some of the projects that already started with Russia should now be continued in some form or other with that source of information.
Yes, Doctor, but we would want to know more from you and your expectations. The Russian industrial zone, which is going to be in East Port side, what kind of industries would Russia be interested in doing in Egypt that would be beneficial for the Egyptian people as well? Yes,
well, first of all, the first industries that were set up by Russia or with Russian help here, some of them were in Helwan. At that time, there was no such concept as an industrial zone, except that it was known that Helwan was to the south of Cairo. It was a progressive area, and the industry sort of started there on the peripheries of the Cairo metropolis. Now, of course, the modern concept is to have an area which is set out for activity. That means it's planned, it has enough electricity, it has its water supplies, it has its transportation, it has its infrastructure. So instead of starting a plant out in the desert, you're starting it somewhere where the main items of success are there. Of course, in the Suez Canal area, the main item of success is also the proximity to means of transportation worldwide, whether to the north or to the south. It is near the Suez Canal area, and it's also near the markets. So it's a good choice. The other thing is that you could have left investment to come in ad hoc. That means a big industrial or conglomerate wants to come in, they negotiate, they get a piece of land there, they start to work in a joint venture. But the idea of having an industrial area, sometimes they call them industrial parks, sometimes they call them industrial areas, but to give a country a whole area is also a rather new concept. What advantages does it have? You have somebody, a large block of country, which means investors, industrialists, everything, placing it out for them. So they don't have to go hunting around and finding is Alexandria better than Cairo, is the south better than north. It is there already, and it will have everything ready for them. So this is a big advantage. Now, you cannot give an area like this, especially the area in let's say thousands of meters, you cannot give it like, unless you're sure that the main backer has got enough projects to occupy this. We know that there are other industrial areas. There's also one with China. So there is more than one, but it cannot be given to a small investor. So I think this is very much of a plus point, that also the location near Port Said and the location to the east. Of course, everything in Egypt are on the west of the canal. Port Said itself on the west. It's only Port Tawfiq and the new projects are on the east. So this is also a chance to develop that area in a very satisfactory manner. I think this is the philosophy that is behind the whole thing.
Actually, Trade Minister Tariq Qabil said that Egypt is looking forward to be a base for Russian investments in Africa and the Middle East. So
Yes.
how do you read this statement, and how can we achieve this?
Well, we always say, and we believe very strongly, that Egypt can be a very good base for Africa.
Yes, it's at the gate of Africa.
Yes, a gate to Africa. Now, I would say yes to a large extent, but we must also not be narrow-minded. Africa now has many gates.
Yes.
And there are gates to the south.
Yes.
I mean, South Africa is also a large
yes.
block. There are direct gates into Africa itself. But Egypt being in this, let's say, strategic position and having tremendously with the African countries, it is certainly one of the more favorable access gates to Africa.
Dr. Rao, what kind of guarantees would be given to the Russian investors who would want to come and start off in this industrial zone, taking into consideration possibly what many believe as the slow procedures, the long-term procedures, bureaucracy, and so forth, and sort of shifting and sort of making the regulations a bit more lenient to attract these investors who really want to come and invest in Egypt without all the barriers that they would find, unlike in comparison with other neighboring countries?
Well, that's a very good question, actually, and it is something most decision makers are aware of in Egypt. The thing is that maybe what we are not aware of is to what extent other countries have gone into making it easier. There are other countries, if you even watch the news and you find advertisements for areas that you never heard of before, and they're saying you're going to get tax exemptions, you're going to have skilled worker, you're going to, and if you look at the industrial areas around the world, they are offering to train all the manpower. If you listen to some of the areas in the Far East, they say, we're going to train our people, we're going to train them in exactly what you want to work. If you're going to do automobile, we're going to train them for you. We're going to give you tax exemptions. We're going to give you electricity at a favorable rate. So you're competing with another industrial area which might be all the way in the Far East. It might be in areas even near New Zealand and Australia.
Wow.
So it's a very competitive business. Now, knowing that, your question was, well, what are you doing? The main thing is to get an area like this out of the normal procedures of bureaucracy. And how do they do that? By having a special new entity which was set up with a previous minister at the head, Mr. Dawish, and they are supposed to be having everything in their hands to a large extent. We call it a one door or a one window, that you go there and you say, okay, I want to so many meters squared, I want so much electricity, I want a building permit, I want a connection of water, I want this and that. And normally, you would have to go, as we do, as normal people go, to electricity people or to the water people or to the land and then registration. So having all these, somebody said that there are needed about 25 of such approvals in normal circumstances. So to have them in one area is, of course, a very big advantage. It's important that this one area, which is now the Suez Canal zone, should be able to handle all this, because they'll have to say, okay, the land, well, now they have the land. Electricity, they are trying now to have their own electricity in that area. So you're competing against Jabal Ali in a way, you're competing against Singapore, you're competing against Hong Kong, you're competing away unnamed areas all over the world. Everybody has got the same idea. So you've got to be more generous, but you don't sell yourself away. But you've got to be more generous, you've got to make it easier. And I'm afraid politics also play a role. I mean, if the politics are good, it shouldn't be that. Business should be business. But politics do help. And you notice that those countries that have already started are those who have got good politics with us, and they feel safe, they feel more, let's say, comfortable with the whole agreement. So that's the way you get over years of starting a business or starting an industry.
So, in your opinion, what kind of Egyptian products can find a good trade market in Russia?
Let's, of course, correct the statement a little bit, because these areas can serve outside Egypt, and they can also serve inside. But if they serve inside, they will be treated exactly like an importer. That means if they produce something there, because actually it is a free zone. So if they bring something back into Egypt, and objective is not so much to feed back into Egypt. The objective is to be able to get out, get into world markets, be competitive, and bring in the needed foreign currency into the country. But it can also feed the needs internally, definitely. But how does it help internally? The labor is from inside. The electricity they're buying is from inside. The water they're taking is from. So there are many sub-activities or industries that are benefiting by giving services to these new areas.
Doctor, I'm sure that a lot of people have asked this a number of times, and there's no doubt about how strong the relationship between Egypt and Russia is, but many people are questioning on the fact that Russia has become a very, very close ally to Egypt, and Russia has become a priority choice to Egypt, especially economic-wise. You said there is a China zone as well, but even though China has become a world-leading power in terms of economy, yet we don't see that much of competition between Russia and China when it comes to Egypt. What are your views about the choice?
Well, the choice is not always your own choice. It's your wanting people to come in, and there's the other side that do these people want to come in here or to go in somewhere else? And I want to tell you something. People who take areas like this for themselves, the countries, they don't take it just for friendship. They have studied exactly what is better, to have something in the Far East, something in close by, somewhere else in the Middle East with all these incentives. You hear about Jabal Ali and those. So it's both-sided. The thing is if there is good chemistry between the two, it makes it much easier. But you must be careful, at least this is my own personal view, politics is tricky.
That's why I asked this question.
Maybe that's why you're asking the question.
Exactly.
Okay. Politics are tricky. Of course, politics are based on everybody finding some advantage. If the advantage at a certain time changes, the politics... well, take any country, our relations to any country, they vary. Politics due to other parties having different ideas, and not we are changing. Other countries are also changing in their interest towards us. So basically, we say that it should be sound economically, it should be beneficial to both parties, so that even if the politics are not 100%, they will still be interested in maintaining, and will be still interested in keeping them working there. Because you can't jump into an industrial area and jump out. You have to be stable.
Okay, Dr. Yossef Mazher, First Under Secretary, Ministry of Industry, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Doctor.
Thank you very much.
And now, dear viewers, we'll go for a short break and we'll resume the breakfast show, so stay tuned.